Good afternoon, everyone. Really honored to be here, especially with Rear Admiral Van Poots, he's the current commander of the Undersea Warfighting community. And today we're just going to be hearing about his perspectives on the current state of the U.S. submarine force amidst all our global partnerships and allies that we're dealing with right now. But sir, I know you wanted to share some opening remarks.
Yes, thank you. So first, I just want to thank the Global Security Forum for having me here. But then secondly, I want to thank all of you for being here. So what you do today matters, whether you're a cadet, a midshipman, whether you're in uniform. You've heard from folks that are retired. There's a whole continuum of service. And what you do now and what you do in the future, it matters in your communities. A little bit about my continuum of service. I've been on and off active duty several times over my since joining the Navy 33 years ago. I'm also one of the Navy ROTC folks here. That's where I started, up at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Worked through that, got an MBA, PhD. I have a civilian career where I've worked over almost 20 years now at a major manufacturing facility that makes about 10 million barrels of beer a year. I'm the technical services manager there, or chief engineer. But right now, I'm the commander of Undersea Warfighting Development Center. Prior to that, I was also the deputy commander for submarine forces. I spent a good number of years, over 8 years, at Office of Naval Research, doing a lot of research development, tests, and evaluation, and a lot of innovation type things. I also currently stand watch as the Airborne Emergency Action Officer with U.S. Stratcom on Operation Looking Glass. And so in my role as Undersea Warfighting Development Commander, you're probably asking what exactly is undersea. So we talked about that there's land, sea, air, space, cyber domains. Well, there's an undersea domain as well. So undersea, everybody immediately thinks of submarines. And yes, there are submarines. Our submarine force is the stealthiest, most survival. It's got the highest survivability, the highest lethality of any submarine force that has ever sailed the seas. And everybody's focused on that when they see undersea. And there's lots of good things going on there. It does offer that survivable option of our strategic deterrence triad that you heard mentioned earlier. I served on several fast attack submarines in the Pacific, in the Atlantic, in the Arctic service. I know we'll talk about Arctic a little bit here shortly. But in addition to that, undersea domain is also subsea and then seabed. So although 90% of the world's commerce may go over the seas, and that's why sea power, I think, is extremely important for our rules-based order that you've heard so much about. If we don't have control of that, that's going to cause a huge impact on our ability to, the way we live, our way of life, our commerce. But also, about 90% of the world's communications go in undersea cables in the subsea and seabed. So that's also very important. Lots of innovation going on there at Undersea Warfighting Development Center. We are the undersea domain, which is what I just mentioned. So submarines and then undersea and seabed. But also we focus on warfighting. So warfighting is where we're taking a look at the tactics and the techniques, some of the procedures. We do assessments, we do analysis. And I know that sounds boring, like that does not sound like fun at all. But we're trying to think, act, and operate differently. So we look at how we think, act, and operate submarines in the undersea domain, and how can we innovate on that. And so the job doesn't sound all that cool, but my aviation version, the Warfighting Development Center for the aviators, they're branded much better than we are, but they're called Top Gun. So we're like the Top Gun for submarines. We do have an aggressor squadron. One of the things we focus on is looking at opposition forces and trying to figure out how are they using the latest technology, what kind of tactics are they using, and so that we can update our tactics as well. And then we ultimately own doctrine. So one of the big advantages that our force has is mission command, where we have units of force, whether that be a submarine or some other unit of force out there where it can get into a situation and with the tactics and latest techniques and latest technology, it can outthink and innovate. So we're really about rapidly innovating and rapidly inserting new tactics and technologies into the battle space to change that calculus. And you can see it live. You heard about it already over in the Black Sea Battle Lab is kind of what I call it, because everybody out there is interacting, and you can see what tactic that worked during the last engagement is not going to work the next time. They're countering each other. So usually there's some sort of military action, then there's the adversary reaction. Well, we're only as good as our last counteraction. And that's how you learn, is actually innovating fast. We need to do that as fast as possible. And that's where things like artificial intelligence, machine learning using large language models, additive manufacturing, these are things that we're looking at. How can we use these to innovate our tactics and our warfighting so that we can provide the most effective undersea force out there to deliver either credible deterrence so that we've got all these other dime options, or if that fails, decisive effects in the undersea domain and win. And so that's a little bit about who Undersea Warfighting Development Center is, a little bit about my background, and maybe we'll start with a question or two.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Just building off that, sir, we'll just kick off on sort of the main topics and ideas that we've been hearing. Recently, AUKUS just celebrated its third anniversary on a Wednesday. And there are two pillars of the alliance. One is just to enable Australia's acquisition of conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarines. And then the other is to develop and provide technological capabilities. I was just wondering if you could speak more on this partnership. I know there's also there's sort of been ideas of growing this alliance in the Pacific. So I'd just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, that's a good question. Thanks for asking. So AUKUS is one of our latest partnerships, treaty alliances we have with Australia, the United Kingdom, and the U.S., pronounced AUKUS. We've got several others. We have alliances and partnerships. You've heard about NATO. One of the things we do in the undersea domain, we are the strategic enduring advantage right now. We are unmatched in stealth and in operations. So we have the ability, we call ourselves the apex predators, but we have the ability to partner and build capacity with other nations. And whether that be in technology, whether that be in tactics, whether that be in exercises or operations. We do that through Submarine Conference of the Americas in South America, Submarine Commanders Conference in NATO with NATO countries that have submarines, AUKUS now with the UK and the US, and also that serves not only to build their capability, like I just mentioned, but also their entire industrial base. We have Australian officers now in our submarine officers basic course. They are on submarines and learning how we operate. We're also partnering with them to build their submarine industrial base. Just like you heard earlier, the maritime industrial base is something we need to rebuild. We can do that with partners as well. We don't have to do it by ourselves. If you saw any NASCAR friends here, anybody like NASCAR? Not one? Okay, a few. Anyway, if you saw the race at Watkins Glen, we had a buildsubmarines.com with Kevin Carr that won with Kevin Kozlowski. But if you go to that website, it's about bringing folks in and getting them the vocational training to do the welding, doing some of the skills so that they can go get jobs in the submarine industrial base or the maritime industrial base. But that's in the U.S. And then also we're doing the same thing down in partnering with Australia to build their submarine industrial base. And part of that treaty is going to, eventually they will end up operating a U.S. Virginia-class submarine, and we're going to be helping them achieve that.
Yes, sir. Just sort of building off that, a second topic that we've been hearing mentioned frequently in this conference is the Arctic. Especially the main threat that we've seen in the Arctic historically has been Russia, but we're also seeing an increasing Chinese presence there as well, mainly through quote-unquote scientific explorations, but nonetheless there's a growing presence there. And considering just Russia's current state with the war in Ukraine, I know their Black Fleet is caught up there, and then the Baltic Fleet is already encircled by NATO countries. The Arctic is becoming sort of an increasing area of importance for Russia to access the Atlantic. So, sir, I'm just curious from a submariner's perspective, how should the U.S. Sort of focus its attention on this region, especially in partnership with our allies in the region?
Well, I can tell you the submarine force, and as far as my role in Undersea Warfighting Development Center, we have been in the Arctic since 1946. So we're not a near Arctic nation, like I heard mentioned earlier. We're an Arctic nation, and we've been there for a long time. So the first submarine, I think, transited under ice in 1947. And we have, in my command, we have an Arctic Submarine Laboratory, which is every other year they do ice camp, where they go up there, and about 200 miles north of Alaska, they set up a camp, and typically we have partner nations there as well. I know France, we've had Norway, we've had the UK will typically bring a submarine up every other year with us, and we will typically have 1 to 2 submarines that'll go up and surface through the ice up there by the North Pole. If you Google it, you'll be able to check out some fun pictures of that. But it's important to operate. Not only have we been operating there, but continue to operate as it opens up. As you heard mentioned earlier, the Northwest Passage is open now. The northern sea routes are open. It's a more economical and secure route to go through the Arctic. It also brings additional threats to the natural resources that are there that belong to the Arctic nations, as maybe near Arctic nations or others are going to go out there and try to lay claim. So in addition to shipping, commerce, it has a huge strategic importance. And the submarine force has a lot of experience operating there, persisting, either transiting or just doing exercises, and partnering with other nations like we do with bringing their submarines up, or having riders on board, or their scientists to do research. We can understand how to exert our sovereignty there, but also share what we've learned as submarine force in the Arctic.
Yes, sir. And just sort of building on that, with Russia, their military has been occupied a lot with Ukraine. And do you think that their submarine capabilities and just their strength has decreased just due to the constraints that the Ukraine war has placed on them? Or are they still as legitimate, as pressing of a threat as they were before February 2022?
Okay, so thanks for your question. So as far as undersea warfighting goes, we definitely take a look at all the adversaries and what their latest tactics, what their latest operations are. And Russian Navy is still operating. They still present a significant challenge for us. They're an acute threat. So their capability is very high. So that is something that we're constantly taking a look at and innovating against and adapting to be able to counter for when we need to do that. Just taking the next step, if you think of the national security strategy, and we've heard that referenced a few times with the integrated deterrence and the decisive decade, not only does it call out Russia as an acute threat, but it also calls out China as the pacing threat. So where Russia may have in the undersea domain some significant capability compared to others, still is not at the level we're at, but significantly higher than most other submarine forces in the world. On the Chinese side, for that adversary, it calls it out as a pacing threat. So they have all that capacity. We heard it mentioned about shipbuilding capacity. They're building a lot of submarines. So that continues to be a big challenge there, kind of a different challenge than we have in Russia, where they don't necessarily demonstrate the same capacity. They have a lot more capability. And so that's something that we're also looking to counter. And as you think about it, as that capacity continues to build and there's more ships, more submarines, more things being made, then you get into the sustainment piece of that, having to do the maintenance, having to do the training. One of our biggest strategic advantages are our people and our experience, our sailors, our soldiers, the folks that have been doing this for a long time. We have a long history and a lot of data built up on successful operations, and that's how we build partner with our allies and other nations to build their capability as they build capacity, so that we can present a united front back to our adversaries that you've heard mentioned today. So whether that's Russia, either in the Arctic or wherever they operate in the undersea, or over in Ukraine, or if it's going to be where we'll end up countering China as well.
Definitely. So in the short amount of time that we have left, just opening it up to Q&A. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask? Yep. All right, here comes the mic. Yeah.
Train up a mountain first.
So I apologize in advance if this kind of seems like a stupid question, but to me, when I think of undersea warfighting, I kind of think of like that like James Bond sort of going into a submarine sort of thing. Could you explain to me what the difference between undersea warfighting and your typical conflict that the Navy would have would be?
Well, thanks for the question. Let me see if I understand. So you're kind of just trying to understand what warfighting in the undersea is. And so that can be everything from submarines, like you described, and what you mentioned is special operations forces, and that is one of the missions that Fast Attack and other submarines can have. But there's also the whole undersea and seabed as well. So remember, I mentioned all the commerce and communications that are flowing, the commerce that depends on the communications flowing on undersea cables, and it's like 90% of the world's communication. So those things need to be monitored, defended, as well. And with the latest technology that comes out, there's a lot of uncrewed, undersea vehicles, autonomous vehicles, just like you would see uncrewed, UASs that are able to fly. Those on the surface. We have the same thing in the undersea, and learning how we can operate those and integrate those into the joint force as we fight with the rest of the Navy. The Navy fights as a joint force. It gets integrated into that. And then not only how do we integrate that into our tactics and techniques and procedures into our doctrine, but how do we think the adversaries may use that same information. And one thing that's giving us, we're seeing is the ability to leverage artificial intelligence and, large language models to help become more efficient and more effective. And one example I can think of is just using a large language model to answer questions about procedures. If you've got all your procedures in a big database, you can ask it a question just like ChatGPT, and right away it can get answers back and cite all your sources in your database super fast. That might be something you have to do on a regular thing for training or maintenance, and you can save a lot of time across the entire force doing that. So you can imagine how you can apply that type of technology to learning and to executing other things, and then what the adversary might do with that same type of technology back on us. So we have to figure out what our next counteraction would be to stay ahead of that, get inside their OODA loop, and make changes to our warfighting faster. Yes, and I think that's probably all we have time for.
Yeah, it looks like it's just counting down. But,
okay.
Sir, thanks again for sharing your thoughts, and thank you to the Global Security Forum for organizing this. This was great. Thank you.
Yes.